The 2000s were the beginning of the superhero genre making a comeback. That was followed by the superhero movie renaissance in the 2010s, which gave us some of the most impressive, satisfying comic book adaptations ever. However, the laws of nature dictate that there can't be good without evil. There are always bad apples in the bunch.
It's morbid time.
For this video, I'm only going to be focusing on movies from 2000 to today, since this is my personal opinion, and I don't know the superhero movies before the 2000s well enough to judge them. My main criteria for this list is how disappointing these movies were compared to the expectations surrounding their release. So, there may be a movie that absolutely sucked that is not on this list, because no one expected it to be good. For example, Morbius will not be on this list. Yes, it sucked, but I don't know a single person that went into that movie expecting it to be good, let alone amazing. But you want to know what is on this list? The first entry, Green Lantern. This poor film has been made fun of a lot over the years, but try to take yourself back to 2011. Marvel was still in its early stages, and had everyone talking about what's next for superhero films. Captain America was next on the slate, and the Avengers was still more than a year out. But before both of those movies were set to release, another contender was finally entering the arena. The powerhouse that is DC. With a treasure trove of characters in their pocket ready to go, they were finally getting into the extended cinematic universe mix with the release of Green Lantern in June of 2011. That's right, don't forget that the Lantern was supposed to be the starting point of the DCEU, the Iron Man of their universe that would launch a global franchise to compete with Marvel, and give comic book nerds everywhere reasons to cheer. And then the film released.
Green!
You get the point. It was such a letdown, and the fans had such a fervent of hate towards this movie that DC just decided, yeah, we're gonna pretend that never happened, resetting the DCEU after the first attempt, and trying again at a fresh start 2 years later with Man of Steel. If you're thinking to yourself, wasn't there another cinematic universe that failed after the first movie? Yeah, there was. But the DCEU has the unique distinction of failing twice now. Next up is The Incredibles 2. Oh. That's right, I said superhero movies, not comic book movies. And this one holds a special place on my disappointment list, because the first Incredibles movie is in my top 5 favorite movies of all time. And this movie just did the first movie, but worse. So much worse. First of all, they undid all the character growth that happened in the original, and then retreaded everything. It actually hurt to watch. Why did they have to make this? I accepted that after 5 years from the release of the original, we weren't getting a sequel. And that was fine. The time had passed. Let the original masterpiece rest untarnished by a sloppy money grab. God damn it. I'm not gonna harp on about this movie, I know some people like it, but for me, one of the biggest movie-going disappointments of my life.
Did you delete the news off the DVR?
Yes, I did, Christopher.
That was the one with Kick-Ass. Ah!
This sequel simply did not need to happen. It was fine, but given how unexpectedly awesome the first one was, an okay sequel is a giant letdown. They tried to do more, but the movie ended up being lesser for it. Matthew Vaughn's absence was noticeable. He brings such a unique energy that's hard to replicate. The action is not close to as good as it was in the original. Ironic, given there are 500 times more superheroes in this one. And why the hell did Hit Girl and Kick-Ass kiss at the end? Overall, subpar.
Life is good, but it can be better.
This movie sucked. There's not much more to say. I almost fell asleep watching this inane attempt of a sequel. I loved the first Wonder Woman, and I don't even care for the DCEU as a whole, but that first movie was great, and I was excited for the second. A lot of people were, and I just can't wrap my mind around what happened. Same director, Gal Gadot returning. It wasn't even fun to watch as a popcorn flick. It really just sucked. I mean, it takes all but 5 minutes for Wonder Woman to rape this dude. And the ending? Everyone revoked their wish, and not one person wished for something good like world peace? My suspension of disbelief doesn't go that far. Talk about ruining a good thing.
Ooh, shiny.
Time to start talking about the X-Men. It won't be the last. Imagine having one of the most iconic superhero characters that have been put to screen in Hugh Jackman's Wolverine. You decide to give him his own solo movie after the original X-Men trilogy concludes. Fans rejoice. Oh, it's a prequel? Okay, cool. Let's see what makes Wolverine Wolverine. And then you release a steaming pile of whatever this is. The movie did have some redeeming qualities. The opening titles were cool, and Liev Schreiber was good as Sabretooth. But after X1 and X2, we were expecting a lot more. X3 did slightly lower expectations, but even so, Hugh Jackman was not the problem with that movie. So the hype to see him go solo was still very high, which made it so crushing when we saw his character hit a new low.
What, we some kind of Suicide Squad?
This movie was hope incarnate. Hope that the DCEU was finally going to have a winner. Get some footing with a kick-ass adaptation of a beloved comic. The trailers were awesome. They got everyone excited. I couldn't care less about the DCEU at the time, but when I saw the first trailer, I said, damn, that looks pretty good. Then when I saw the second trailer, I said, damn, that looks pretty good. I knew next to nothing about the characters, and yet I was excited. I remember all my friends being excited as well, especially those that were fan of DC. Finally, they had something to cheer for. Perhaps it's this excitement that blinded us all to the blatant red flags staring right at us. Drastic changes in tone between trailers, rewrites and reshoots abound, and man does it show. I remember sitting in the theater, and I can't remember exactly what character introduction it was with the dumbass graphics, but I just remember thinking, they are trying way too hard. As each minute passed, I legitimately sank lower and lower into my seat as I realized I had to sit through the rest of this lie. I was promised kick-ass fun, and instead I was getting the katana speech. And no comment about the Joker. Hats off though to Viola Davis for bringing way too much pedigree to this film. Glad they brought her back for the good one.
Is revealed.
Another truly disappointing X-Men entry, Apocalypse just wasn't it. After falling off with X3 and Origins, X-Men made a miraculous comeback with their soft reboot of the franchise. First Class was pretty good, an enjoyable watch. Then Days of Future Past surpassed expectations, delivering an incredibly fun, tight story that felt like a return to the heights the franchise was once at. At this point, excitement was really high for the next entry. After all, it's not like we've ever been burned before by a horrible third entry in an X-Men movie series. Why must the team at Fox routinely let us down? The last movie was so good, and you follow it up with a subpar entry at best? I remember being devastated that another once promising X-Men movie series was crumbling at the finish line. I honestly couldn't believe it. It was a 28-3 type collapse for the second time, and it was not fun to watch unfold. And you already know what followed it. RIP to the Fox X-Men. You had a troubled run.
They are beautiful.
Yes, they are beautiful. They also scream quite a lot.
The MCU has entered the chat with a truly mind-boggling stinker of a movie. Gun to my head, I couldn't tell you a basic order of events in this film because it's so forgettable, which is so incredibly disappointing. Thor is such a good character that had so much going for him. Ragnarok is one of my favorite superhero films of all time. I love Thor in Infinity War, and while I wasn't a huge fan of every aspect of Fat Thor, I did love that it gave him an emotional depth that made him feel more relatable. Just like Wonder Woman 1984, there were no obstacles stopping a great movie from being made. Taika Waititi was back directing, the characters Valkyrie and Korg were returning. You even had the Guardians of the Galaxy to work with. The trailers looked fun. What happened? Why does it feel like this movie is just shitting all over itself, and the MCU as a whole? Ragnarok was the perfect balance between humor, bizarre comic book concepts brought to life, and character-driven story. This movie has infinity cones. That's like having an Auschwitz shake shop. It's horrible, and a ginormous letdown, especially for me. I was so looking forward to this movie, and I left feeling like I was lured into the theater on purpose just to be made fun of. Like they knew I was excited, so they purposely made it as shitty as possible just to devastate me. It felt personal. Also, all that teasing and Thor never fucked his ex. 0 out of 10.
Now dig on this.
I think this one may be divisive. There are some who think this should be number 1, and others who think it shouldn't be in this video at all. But don't let the meme revival of this movie influence how you felt in 2007. The first 2 Sam Raimi Spider-Man films helped put comic book movies back into the spotlight. They were amazing. Spider-Man 2 was a masterpiece, one of the best superhero movies of all time, if not the best according to some people. So, it is safe to say the hype was as high as it had ever been for a superhero movie going in the 2007 Spider-Man 3. And that led to the devastating reality that is this movie. It was heartbreaking. I remember being in legitimate denial. I tried to convince myself that what I just watched wasn't as goofy and all over the place as I thought. But man, there was just no denying it. I hate that they retconned Uncle Ben's death. And Topher Grace as Venom was just not the correct choice. The movie was full of not correct choices, and it makes you wonder how one can fall so far. Although, it does get points for the retrospective fun it's provided.
This was fun! No!
This is another personal one. I cannot comprehend how they fucked this up. It had everything going for it. People loved the character, so much so that it's really the fans that made this movie happen. We were clamoring for it for years, begging for a Black Widow solo movie. We wanted to see her origins, the Red Room, what happened in Budapest, what is the red in her ledger. So much material to work with, and they used none of it. You want to know about Budapest? Here's a tic-tac-toe game. Go nuts. And that red in her ledger? No red at all, actually. Gray at best. The child she thought she had killed survived, and is now a mute taskmaster. It makes me so angry thinking about how they pissed away their opportunity to flesh out Natasha Romanoff as a character. Instead, we got pheromone bullshit and a feature-length introduction to a new character. If you want to see a good story about an already established character and learn how they became who they are today, Better Call Saul. But if you want to watch directors play with a character they know can't be killed, then Black Widow is the slogfest for you. Quick anecdote about when I first saw this movie, I was not sure I was in the right theater for like the first 10 minutes. And when I saw it a second time with a friend, he leaned over to me about 5 minutes in and asked if this was the right movie. And one more thing, the opening title sequence belongs in a YouTube tribute video, not an MCU film. Here are some quick honorable mentions of movies that were disappointing, but either didn't have high expectations or were serviceable enough. Justice League, Iron Man 2, Thor the Dark World, Avengers Age of Ultron, Dark Phoenix. And now, onto the most disappointing superhero movie of them all. X-Men 3, The Last Stand.
I'm the Juggernaut, bitch!
A pillar of disappointment. The sheer letdown of this movie comes from understanding where we were at the time. X-Men was the first solid superhero franchise we had. It was the beginning of a revival for the genre. Yes, there were the old Superman movies and the more recent Blade movies, but neither of those series were as consistent and promising as X-Men was. So after the massive critical success of X2, fans were hyped for the bound-to-be epic conclusion to this trilogy. It was supposed to be a, reference intended, Phoenix-type movie. Yes, it was the ending of this trilogy, but it was going to go out in a blaze of glory, where from the ashes would rise more exciting X-Men material. And then the film came out, and it was simply a disappointment. And the reason it's a pillar of disappointment is because it is truly the first time a superhero movie franchise has built itself up to such high heights. You have to remember, in 2006, this was basically it. Unlike today where there are 5+ superhero movies released a year, back then it was 1, maybe 2. So if it sucked, there was no chance for redemption 3 months down the line. The other superhero film released that year was Superman Returns. And you want to know what film was released the next year? Spider-Man 3. It would be 2 years until Iron Man was released. I remember watching Last Stand and throughout the movie thinking, why? When Cyclops dies off screen, I thought, why? When Professor X died, I thought, why? When Mystique lost what made her Mystique, I thought, why? Why is what is happening on screen happening? If you were born after 2000, you truly don't understand. Like I said, there are so many options today, but in 2006, fans were banking on this movie being good, and it just wasn't. It was a true superhero-sized disappointment. And that's it. Look, if you like these movies, good for you. They don't have nothing to offer. I can still watch some of these and genuinely enjoy myself. But generally speaking, they were all pretty disappointing. You wanna know what superhero movie wasn't disappointing? Mystery Men. That film is a masterpiece.